Constable Albert Alexander didn't think too much of it when, that fateful day in 1941, he was scratched on his face by a thorn from a rose. But within a couple of weeks, his whole face became infected, and in fact, one of his eyes had to be removed. It was a terrible case. Somehow, it came to the attention of Mrs. Ethel Florey, wife of Dr. Florey, who was working at Oxford University trying to isolate penicillin. About a decade earlier, Alexander Fleming had discovered that bacteria did not grow around the mold that had accidentally infected one of his petri dishes. But try as he might, he was unable to extract the active ingredient. And this is what Howard Florey was working on. And he thought that he was making headway because he had tried the extract on some rodents and it seemed to work. But he was unwilling to try it on a patient because he didn't know potential side effects. So he was really looking for a patient who was in very dire states and who was essentially on the verge of death. And Constable Alexander fit the bill. So he got an intravenous infusion of penicillin, and almost immediately he began to feel better, and the abscesses began to look better. Unfortunately, though, they didn't have enough penicillin to keep the treatment going. It was very hard to isolate. So they even resorted to extracting remnants of the drug from the constable's urine and then re-infusing it. And they kept this going for a few days, but unfortunately, eventually they ran out of penicillin and the patient died. However, it had been clearly demonstrated that this was a wonder drug, that it actually worked. But they had to scale up production. That task fell to microbiologist Norman Heatley, also working with Florey and with his colleague Ernst Chain. And modeled on bedpans, he designed these containers in which the mold could be grown. And they were growing significant amounts of mold and were trying it on patients, but still the yield was low. Luckily, in Peoria, Illinois, researchers discovered a cantaloupe that produced a mold that had a very, very high yield of penicillin. And within a couple of years, there was commercial production based upon that mold, and this really helped the Allies win the Second World War, because Allied soldiers could be treated with penicillin for their infections. In 1945, Florey, Chain, and Fleming were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine for their discovery of the drug that brought people back from the dead. And that for today is our pewter cup of joe.